Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Demystifying Post-Production Motion Monday. Welcome back to the final week of our Redshift workflows. My name's Ellie, I'm a trainer at Maxon, and I'm joined by some very lovely special guests. So hey to Adrian, Dustin, Ian, Lionel, and we also have Simon Walker in the background hiding away. So hey guys, how you doing?
Doing great as always.
Yeah, doing awesome.
Good.
Happy Monday, everyone.
Yeah, happy Monday, and happy Monday to everyone in the chat already. So hey to Charles, Hannah, Andrew, Jay, Atla, Marcelo, Drake, Greg. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us so early in a lot of your days. So before I hand over to Adrian and before we dive into what we're going to be doing today, you all know by now I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So if you want to know about all the great events that we have going on, and there are a lot, like I'm super excited to talk about all the great stuff that we have going on, all you have to do, head over to this page on the maxon.net website, which is just our events page. And you can see all the stuff that we have going on, whether it's live events or in-person events, which are going to be coming soon. So we have our Demystifying Post-Production Redshift workflows in Maya today. Then tomorrow, I'm actually doing my very first live stream over on YouTube. I'm going to break down a little bit of some smoke and particle effects. Then on Wednesday, we have our hands-on with Maxon character creation workflow, which is with Joe Herman, where he's been going through everything from sculpting in ZBrush to UVing in Cinema 4D, texturing inside of Redshift and creating hair. And I believe we're going to be diving into some rigging over these last 2 weeks. We also have the wonderful Paul Gabori diving into some ZBrush hard surface modeling. We then have Max's Maxon Color, which are the alternate Thursdays to our Ask the Trainer, as well as VFX and Chill on Friday. And I also want to quickly talk about the next month's topic of demystifying, because as you guys know, every single month we change our topic, and this is the final week where we're diving into Redshift. And then next week, so starting next Monday, we are going to be building Unreal Worlds with ZBrush and Substance Painter, and that will be with Anna Carolina. And it's also going to be the first time where we're moving this demystifying series over to YouTube Live. So I know a lot of you love to communicate with one another through the questions area, and so what we're going to be doing is we're moving that onto YouTube Live. So bear that in mind. You can set up your notifications on there and get registered for that, just like you do for these. And one final thing I do want to talk about is we have the amazing Grayscale Gorilla founder, Nick Campbell, showing up on our Ask the Trainer on February 9th. And he'll be diving into some secrets to making your C4D renders look very amazing, just like all of his work does. So definitely, yeah, keep an eye out on all the great stuff that we have going on. And that is not the page I wanted. If you ever miss any of our sessions or want to sort of see the live streams we have going on or just learn something new, then everything gets recorded and put on our very special Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, which is this channel here. So don't forget, here is where you can get notifications for all of the live streams we have going on. And then we also have everything separated into its own playlist, just like Hands with Maxon and just like our demystifying sessions. And shout out to Dr. Sassy, because he goes through and timestamps pretty much every single thing we do, which is great because then you guys can go on there and you can click a specific thing and then you can dive into that tool or that feature as much as you want to. Finally, I do want to say thank you to everyone who comes and watches our live shows. We want to say thanks for being part of our community by giving you a free Maxon t-shirt. All you have to do, click this link and the password is creative2023. It's good for one shirt. All you have to do is pay for shipping, and you can find this page in the handout section of GoToWebinar, including all the links to the stuff we just talked about. But if you can't find that, just let me know and I can link you to it in the questions area. So, Adrian, diving into Redshift and Maya, did you want to take over and talk to everyone about the kind of stuff we're going to be going through today?
Yeah, how do I take it over?
I'm throwing over to you now.
So show my screen, right?
Yep.
Man, I'm a professional. Okay. Hey guys.
So the rest of us.
Redshift for Maya. Now, I'm going to start with a bit of history if you want. Redshift started as an official app in 2013, and Redshift for Maya and Redshift for XSI were the first two apps that were getting support for Redshift. So from this point of view, I think for the last 10 years, everybody kind of knows what Maya can do and how Redshift works. So initially I thought about, hey, let's show what Redshift can do in 45 minutes. No, I think you can do that by yourself, and I don't think it's really, really hard. Now, I've prepped something, and of course, as always, when you prep something, you run into bugs. Not our bugs, but something you cannot control. So, for instance, the thing I was preparing to do is, you know, the content browser, the magnificent content browser in Maya that gives you pretty much nothing. You can go and, for instance, browse for things, right? But the content browser, even if it's pretty decently fast, it doesn't give you what you want always. And for instance, if you want to create a texture, let's say, I can take actually any example or favorites or whatever. It doesn't give you many options. You can import a scene or do something like that, right? And for instance, if you have a texture, let's say you get textures in here, what can you do with them? I think it's better to give you an example. For instance, I have HDRIs here, and I've opened the Air HDRI folder, and I'm waiting. Okay, so this is not bashing the content browser in Maya in any way. It's not just not made for Redshift, that's all, right? So I have about 40 textures, and they look like that. They look a bit odd if you want. They're a bit small, but the thing is, what can you do with them? You drag mouse button, you can open it as a texture. That's not something that we do for with the textures, at least for Domelights, for instance, right? So to be honest, it's quite fast and quite simple to develop tools in Maya, right? And for instance, in kind of like 50 lines of code, you can get something like this, right? Where you can select your Domelight. Sorry, let me hide this go to webinar because it's my way, right? And you can say, hey, I want to set a texture, right? And it can set a string for you wherever you want and stuff like that. I don't want to show you this because although it's not very complicated and you can do a lot of things in Maya, I don't think it's something that everybody is keen on start learning Mel or Python. Okay, so I've decided to show you something that's probably less known, but extremely useful, and that is proxy workflows. And to be honest, the theme for today about proxy workflows, I've got that like 10 minutes ago, so bear with me, guys. What are proxies? Proxies are in essence Redshift scenes. They're not, how should I put it? They're not in the sense of a traditional scene where you can open it and play with it. No, they're kind of black boxes where you can set or overwrite data. And this has advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage is that you can, for instance, let's say I have this little scene, right? Or even better, I can come to C4D and export something. It's the same scene, doesn't really matter, right? Because you have this great and wonderful content browser in C4D, and I'm going to piggyback on the fact that I have a license for this and grab something from here, right? So I can download an asset from the content browser, and I'm going to send it over to Maya. Now, I'm doing this on purpose, actually, and the reason for this is quite simple. I like to show you how you move data between apps. Okay, right now I have this, and to be honest, I have no clue what it is. I've just downloaded it. I did not prepare this in advance, not at all. So let's go to File, Export, Redshift Proxy, and there's a few things that I have to pay attention to. Now you can export the selected objects, and when you select export just the selected objects, if you need a camera and you want the proxy, the Redshift scene, right, to be rendered, you need a camera. Otherwise, it won't render. Now, when you're exporting the proxy, it's very important to know what you want to do with it afterwards. For instance, by default, Polygon Connectivity, it's off. But Polygon Connectivity basically means tessellation and displacement. So if you have exported your proxy without Polygon Connectivity and you're later on you decide, hey, I want this proxy to be tessellated or displaced, you won't be able to. So think about these things from the beginning. Okay, this is really, really important. For instance, you have a small animation that you've done it in Houdini or something, right? And you want to export it. It's a simulation of some sort. You want to export it as a proxy to be used in your pipeline with C4D or Maya, doesn't matter. So you spend a week doing it, right? You export it and you go on vacation. And the guy that gets the scene needs to motion blur it, but you forgot to actually enable motion blur in your scene when you exported the proxy. And this is really, really important because you won't be able to motion blur if the scene doesn't have motion blur enabled. For instance, if we're opening the render settings, if you don't have motion blur in here enabled for whatever you need, when you're exporting the proxy won't contain the extra data that it's necessary, because in animation in general, a frame starts when motion blur is on, it starts at frame minus frame start. I know it's a bit of math. Basically, it doesn't start at frame, let's say frame 10. It starts somewhere before frame 10 and somewhere after frame 10. So if the proxy is not aware of this, it cannot sample the data, or whatever happens in the scene, it cannot sample and store it in the proxy. And that means you won't have motion blur. You won't have deformation motion blur. Oh yeah, you can have transformation motion blur because you can export a cube as a proxy and move it around. And yes, it will have motion blur because you moved it, but it doesn't have the motion blur from any deformation or internal transformation that you do on the proxy in the export scene or app or whatever. On top of that, you have all the materials that you trail along, and you think, hey, because I can have proxies from one DCC to another, I can send it to Maya. I'm going to have all my materials in Maya from C4D, or the other way around, right? It doesn't happen that way, simply because, and I'm going to explain that in a second, DCCs are incompatible. So for instance, a material in Houdini or in Maya or in C4D is different in essence from one 3D app to another. And basically, even if you have the capability of exporting a proxy is not open, so you can extract materials, for instance, right? So let's have a look at how we can export this. So I don't want to talk and not show you much. So export Redshift proxy, right? And I'm gonna export just the selected object. I don't have any lights. I don't plan to tessellate or displace. And to be honest, it's a simple object. I don't need to compress the data. Now, this is interesting because you can have huge scenes that you can compress to save space. The problem with the compress is that it has to decompress at render time. So there's a balance there. What do you need? You need to spend time on decompressing if the proxy is huge, or you need more space. It depends where you want to go with this. Now, I'm not bringing the proxy back. The mouse went big. Anyway, I'm not getting the proxy back or anything, so I don't care about anything else. This is not an animation yet. Okay, so I'm just gonna go okay and say, hey, this is what? It's a Blender. Okay, blender.rs. Now, this is important for macOS because being a Unix system, you need to specify an extension. Okay, so we can say goodbye to C4D and come back to Maya. The only reason I'm doing this is because, again, content browser is nicer. Okay, so let's get into Maya. And now, one thing I like to point out is the following. By default, Maya works in centimeters internally. Okay, if I put this to meters, internally, Maya will still calculate centimeters. So everything will be 100 times smaller, bigger, and so on, so depending on whatever you set in here, which means by default, a cube. Let's create a cube, a great primitive. Don't know who invented it, but it's absolutely fantastic. So if you look at it, a cube in Maya, because to be honest, Maya is kind of designed, or it was designed to replace miniatures, if you want. In 90 something, we were still doing miniatures on the set, right? And you can see here the polycube has 1 centimeters. Okay, now if we compare this to a simple cube in here, this is 200 centimeters, which means if you have materials that are depending on the actual size of the objects, when you move them around, things might be different. Okay, I'm not doing this on purpose to annoy you. I'm just trying to raise a flag where you might get in trouble. Okay, now the way proxies work in Maya for C4D, it's a tiny bit different than the other DCCs. Let me show you. So I'm gonna create a sphere. I know it's annoying, but basically what happens from the plugins point of view, and to show you that I have to open the node editor. Okay, so what do you see here? You see there's a node called Polysphere1, which is actually creating the object. The shape of the node, which actually contains the data produced by whatever incoming generator you have. You can consider this as a generator, right? And then you have the transform node. This is how Maya works. Maya splits the actual transformation of your mesh and the mesh and the generating nodes. Now, if I open this, you're gonna see there's a connection between the output of the polysphere and the in mesh. Now, when you're creating a proxy in Maya, what happens is the following. We create this shape, which holds the data for the mesh. We create a node for the transform. And then we create some sort of generator, if you want, which is the proxy node. And that means you have to be careful when you're creating your proxies in Maya, because I have this guy selected and I'm gonna go proxy create. Now watch what's happening in here. Okay, you already see there's an out mesh goes into the proxy mesh and the play shape, and things are a bit different. Let me go to the desktop and I have a proxies here and get the Blender. Okay, now, as you can see here, it's a bit odd. You have a Redshift proxy placeholder shape, and it still looks like a sphere. There's a proxy in there. You can put it in bounding box and preview mesh, okay, or link mesh. And this can be confusing because if you have something selected, when you're creating a proxy in Maya, what usually happens is that the Redshift proxy node gets connected to the in-mesh. In this case, very specific case, I have an in-mesh connection already, okay? And this can be a bit confusing. You can see here, there's a lot of nodes that are attached to this. Now, the right way to create a proxy, and I'm sorry if this sounds a bit of like baby talk, you know, simple things, but it is important, is that you don't have anything selected when you create the proxy. Things are a bit different, isn't it? I mean, you had this the polysphere, you have the mesh, and that goes into the proxy. This time it doesn't. From the proxy goes into placeholder shape, and then it will go into the transform, right? So if I connect or choose right now the Blender, okay, instead of the sphere, you have, of course, the proper mesh, right? It's not the cube anymore. Of course, this is a bit odd because what you're seeing here is not actually the geometry. It's a basic triangulated mesh. I'm going to explain that in a second. Okay, so let's say for a second that I want to scale this down, and I want to look through my camera, some of the cameras. So let's see which one. This one. Oh, I was already on this camera. Perfect. Okay, and I want to render this. Now, because this is a proxy, it contains a few things. It contains meshes, instances, lights, cameras, but cameras cannot be read from the proxy into the scene. Materials that you see here, this is a list of the material names, nothing else. Okay, and this sometimes can be tricky because internally Redshift can use two things: real names or nice names. A nice name is something like this: my material something, right? The real name of the material might be some garbled numbers and letters, kind of a hash string, and that's it. Okay, now if it can happen that sometimes these things don't work. For instance, the proxy material here that you see, it's untitled _1 column. Now you cannot use column in a name. For instance, you cannot put something like this. This is illegal in Maya, and that means this can break materials. Okay, so you have to pay attention on how you name your materials and where the materials are coming from. For instance, in this case from C4D, because of the column and because of the way C4D works when it exports things, if you look at C4D, the material is called Blender jug, right? You see any sort of untitled one? No, you don't, right? On top of that, Blender has this thing of C4D has this thing of allowing duplicate names. So you can create a material and then make a copy of this material called, surprise, surprise, the same thing, matte. Okay, and one might be red, one might be blue. Doesn't matter. For the user, what you see, it's matte and matte. Well, when you're exporting this, and let me just show you this in a second. Let's convert this to a regular mesh and just grab a face like these three and do that. Grab the other three and do this, right? So this is a two-color approach for this mesh, right? Now, if I export this to Maya, I'm gonna end up with something a bit odd, if you want, and totally unexpected from a Maya user point of view, because in Maya, you cannot have duplicated names. Nothing can be duplicated. Everything is unique. In C4D, everything can be duplicated. You can have multiple scenes upward. You can have the same exact material names in different scenes. And this, if you don't know how to work with that, this can be a bit of a problem. C4D doesn't have this problem because internally, this, what you see here as matte, is never called matte. It has an internal name that's not visible to the user, that's unique, and no problems whatsoever, right? So, for instance, if I come and export this, let's export this as a proxy. And by the way, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I'll try to come up with some answers. Okay, so we've exported the cube. To be honest, I'm doing this because this is a big topic, and sometimes you get frustrated by things that make sense in one app and it doesn't in another. So let me just hide this and bring the cube. And as always, I'm taking care of not having something selected. Just reminding you that you have to be careful. Desktop proxies cube. Okay, it's a big cube because it's 200 by 200, right? And you see this thing, what you see here is an issue with clipping planes. Okay, what happens is that Maya, because it works in so small scale, although a camera is going from almost zero to 10,000 centimeters, it's what? Not so much. Okay, so it tries to accommodate the viewport for this. So the way you go around this is by using a bigger near clipping plane. That means if you have something really, really small and you want to go close, well, you have to choose between going close or going far. Okay, so we have this. And you're looking at the proxy materials here. What do you see? Matte something. Okay, this whatever you want to call it, it's called a hash. Okay, it's a unique identifier for a material. And this is something you don't quite always get or read or something, right? So you can see here, there's a default material. You don't know where that is assigned. There's an untitled column matte something and something that looks almost identical. But you can see here at the very end, okay, this is 5.4, this is 8.4. So they're different. Although in C4D, they look like matte and matte, things are really complicated around here. So for this, I suggest that you always, but always do your materials in your rendering app. If it's Maya, do your materials in Maya. If it's C4D, do it in C4D. If it's Houdini, do it in Houdini, and so on and so forth. Why? Because you might end up with issues like this. And sometimes it might work, sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, I don't think it's possible to fix it. And the reason for this is this little column. Okay, Maya cannot represent that, so I cannot name something, a material like this. It's impossible. Okay, so how does it work with material naming, renaming, or how is this thing with material works with proxies? We've already established that the proxy, it's in essence a Redshift scene, right? And it contains whatever you want to contain in there. Now, when you're working with materials, let's take, for instance, let's create something really, really simple. I'm sorry, guys, if I don't give you Hollywood quality models and things like this. I prefer to explain it with simple things that make sense and you will remember. Okay, so what do we have? We have pretty much, if we're looking at this guy here, we have Lambert1 initial particle. Okay, not a big deal. Let's create two materials out of this. Okay, let's take half a sphere. Let's make it easier for me. Okay, and select half of this. Oh, come on. Let's isolate it because otherwise I have a locator and it has priority. Okay, so let's create a material for this part and a material for this part. So I have two materials, material 1 and material 2. And the way materials are assigned in Maya are not by the material. This is not the actual material, although we call it material. Okay, it is a material in terms of animation model, but the assignment of any sort of data is done through this. This is, although it's not very visible for the user, it's a set. It's a list of association. It's these faces or this object have these materials assigned. This is the whole role of the shading group, to assign a material to something. And that something can be, as I said, an object, a collection of objects, or faces. Okay, so we're going to start with material 1 and 2. And for the sake of the argument, I'm going to make them red and blue. Don't ask me why red and blue, is just by chance. Okay, make it green. So if I export this as a proxy, what I'm gonna end up with is not what you're expecting. RS Material 1 and RS Material 2. Redshift Proxy Export options. Again, I don't need to do any tessellation right now, okay, or motion blur or anything. Export selection. Let's export it on my desktop on proxies. This will be simple ball.rs. Okay, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hide this. So basically, I'm gonna put it on a display layer and hide it. Okay, I'm still in isolated mode. Okay, Redshift Proxy create. And let's bring that, you know what? I'm gonna click a lot on this, so let's bring the proxies here. Simple ball. Okay, and let's look at the parameters. So if you were expecting to get RS Material 1 and RS Material 2, as you can see here, what you're getting is the shading group. What does it mean? It means that if you're trying to override the materials for this proxy or any material inside the proxy, you're gonna have to pay attention to the shading group. So don't go willy-nilly and name this something like you can't remember, because this will be a bit of a pain later on, right? So try to be patient and don't do things too hastily. It's better to spend time and organize your work and name things properly than rush and then try to figure out what you did. Because in 6 months' time, you have to revisit the scene. It will be a pain. Okay, so we've established that material naming don't come from the materials that you simply go like this. They go from the shading group, the set that assigns or makes the connection between the objects or parts of the object, like faces, okay, and the materials. And yes, you can include or exclude objects. I double click this and it goes away or not. And I can show you this by preview mesh. Okay, well, what you see here in the preview mesh, and believe you me, it doesn't render that. Okay, as you can see here, if I double click to enable it, it comes back alive. Okay, so if you think that you can do the same thing with proxy materials, you can't. Okay, this is a list of materials that you can, well, change if you want. And let me show you how you can overwrite proxy materials. I'm going to start a new scene, nothing. Okay, and Redshift Proxy create. Now, if you're bored, please let me know. I have no idea. I can't look at whatever you guys are saying or anything.
Definitely not bored. Some lovely comments in here as well, saying really nice how you're explaining. Thanks so much. We did have a quick question actually, which you may or may not have answered, but from Lola, what exactly is the benefit of using both C4D and Maya simultaneously?
You're gonna get me biased with this question. I'm what you called a dinosaur. I started 3D animation in '92, a long time ago. Okay, I worked for Alias Wavefront when we made Maya. And then I did production for years, for movies, for commercials, and so on and so forth. So I've done a lot of things, including compositing, in both as an artist and with TD and so on. The thing is, 10 years ago, I started with Redshift, right? And to be honest, it was the first time when I could afford to render something properly, because I don't have a render farm in my backyard and I don't have a render farm in my closet. But for the first time, I was able to render on a simple computer just because my graphics card was decent enough. And by decent enough, I mean I had 4 gigs of RAM. Okay, it was a 670 something, a long time ago. It did magic. Okay, and I fell in love with Redshift. And then because we've been bought by Maxon, and I had to support C4D as well, I got into C4D and I fell in love with C4D as well. I'm sorry, guys, even if you're a traditionalist Maya user, I did, okay, as I fall in love with Houdini. Everything is nice, okay, and I find it easier and more fascinating to use sometimes as a quick tool. C4D, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, if I want to go to nitty-gritty, probably Maya will get me further, but you will need to go into programming mode, okay, and build your own tools, and it's absolutely fantastic. But each tool has its own advantages and disadvantages, and because the 3D world is so complex and fascinating, sometimes you want to make things really, really fast and good without having to go too complex. And yes, that's a good question. I'll give you a simple example. See this little cube? I want to do a small animation with it and instance it as particles and make it collide, right? So I can go in here. I'm sorry if I'm getting a bit not lost, but a bit away from the actual topic. Let me delete this and start with something really simple, like I don't know, 5 and 5. Okay, and emit some particles. So let's go to simulate emitters. Now, the emitter in C4D is not what you would really always want to. You might be better with thinking particles or X particles, but you know what? You can use it. So if I parent this to the emitter, right, and I click play, I'm getting those, right? But I can show objects and I'm getting the instancer. Now I can turn this into a monograph object, right? So I can actually no. Let's do something different. Let's make it a rigid collider, a soft body or something. The thing is, I can turn this into a simulation right away. Right? It will be really quick. At this point, I have, for instance, I have instancing going. So if I render this, and by the way, I'm on a Mac, I have no problem with the little NVIDIA issue that we have lately, where things are really going slow due to the NVIDIA bug driver bug. And to be honest, I'm on a slowest machine you can find for Redshift. It's a Mac Mini with 16 gigs of everything, and that's it. Okay, you can't find something slower than this, but you know what? It works, which is absolutely amazing. So that said, let's say I have this little animation. I'm not gonna complicate things with going into dynamics or anything, right? But I could do this, and I can have collision on a lot of things pretty fast. I don't have to do much, right? But to do the exact same thing in Maya would mean I have to create a cube, create particles, instancing, write expressions, and then find a way to replace at collision time the objects. And it's a bit harder. So that's why, for me, as both 3D as an artist, I find C4D extremely easy to use and really a pleasure to tinker with. Maya is more for, this is my personal opinion, has nothing to do with the company. Maya is more for a TD kind of guy. And it's somewhere between Houdini and C4D. Okay, it can do many great things, but you have to understand how it works. Okay, and if you want to get really nitty gritty, you need scripting. And Maya is pretty good at this. So let's go back to, I'm sorry if I diverged a bit. So let's go back to this proxy issue, right? So we have these two materials. And sometimes you want to change somehow your proxy. For instance, let's say for a second that I want to export everything from here, this emitter. What do you think you're gonna get in Maya if I export this? And I'm gonna export as a proxy sequence. Okay, selected objects, that's fine. Current, let's go manual, like 50 frames. Okay, and then call this particles dot. Well, this is a bit of an issue with the naming here. If I put dot .rs, and you would expect to happen something between these two dots, it won't. So I'm going to do the particles exactly as you see it here. It takes a bit of while to export that. And let's see if we're on desktop proxies. Nothing happened, right? So try again. I might have made a mistake. Not STL, sorry. File, export, proxy. Okay, manual 0 to 50, selected objects. What are the selected objects? Not many, right? So, okay. Did I get a particle RS? No. So let's put particle or particles. Man, I can't type. No objects selected. This is a bit of an issue, right? Because I can't quite export this. So you know what? Let's fake it. Let's export everything. And to be honest, these are the interesting parts of this presentation, if you want, because it tries to show you the pitfalls and the issues that you can get into. Okay, and I'm gonna say export everything. So particles. Okay, I'm still getting an error, or it works. One of these two. Let's see. Oh, it works. Okay. So if I try to put a dot dot, it doesn't. So we're gonna work with it as it is. So 22, 26, 30. You know what? Let's let it crunch the data there. So if I go here in Redshift and I have nothing selected, and I create the proxy, and I'm going to proxies, and I pick this up. I don't know how big it is. It's 100 centimeters by default, the emitter. Okay, I'm gonna try to preview my mesh, and for a second, if you're expecting to see anything, I can tell you you're not gonna see anything. Okay, and this is someplace, I don't know where, but believe me, it's in the scene. Okay, and let's do this. And I only have 50 frames, so okay. Lucky for us, we can see these, but it doesn't always happen, because the reason you see them is because this is a geometry. It's not instancing. And that means this is highly inefficient. The way this should have been exported, and totally it's my fault, it's render instances, because this turns meshes into proper instances. What C4D calls instance, it's in essence a copy. Okay, so I'm not gonna start again exporting this because it's boring. I'm gonna come back and just pay attention to the fact that sometimes if you see something or you don't, what you don't see, for instance, if I export particles, these won't be visible because the mesh preview, it's only for meshes, not for points. Particles are in essence points, so these are not visible. What the proxy can show you is just meshes, nothing else. Okay, and you remember about exporting this with motion blur and everything? Well, if I try to render this, okay, and let's say for a second I want to render this with motion blur, so we're gonna go here and enable motion blur. 2 steps, it's okay, it's enough. You're gonna notice I don't get motion blur, or if I get, it's by chance, if you want. Okay, the question is, do I get motion blur or not? And the only answer I can give you is the following. If in this scene I have motion blur enabled, I will get it. Okay, and I did. If I export the same thing without motion blur, and to be honest, by chance I have this motion blur enabled, because I didn't think it's before. I just exported it, right? And to be honest, if you, as I said, You do a very, very nice simulation or whatever. You export it, you go on vacation because you work so hard and deserve it. And then you go away. Nobody knows about you. The guy that received the mesh has to render with motion blur. And it's human error to forget to check one checkbox, motion blur on, right? It's not even, sometimes it's not even visible. It's not in your face when you're exporting it. Although in Houdini it is. Well, it's closer to your face, let's say. Okay, so yeah, you might be in trouble because you won't be able to make this work. Now, getting back to actual materials, right? Because this is where I was trying to get, and I'm still having 10 minutes left. I'm sorry, guys. I'll try to talk faster. So basically, what happens is the following: you have some materials, and if you want to override these materials, actually, what you can override are these and the materials, and that's that. Okay, there's one little thing that's really specific to Maya. You can have a linked mesh, and that means, for instance, if you have a tree, you can model a low poly tree and link the mesh from the proxy to the low poly tree, and that means the visual or viewport representation of your proxy won't be a box or trying to have the preview mesh, which is a tree with 2 million or 5 million triangles in your scene. That will really slow you down. You can, of course, go for display percentage, but to be honest, this doesn't look like a sphere anymore, right? It looks like anything but a sphere. The bounding box doesn't tell you much. The preview mesh might be too heavy, so you can use the link mesh, where you can have another low-res mesh that you can use it. I have a video for that on my Vimeo channel if you want to have a look at that. But we're talking about material overrides, right? And in this sense, what do you have? We have RS material 1SG and 2SG, right? And a few ways you can overwrite materials. For instance, I just assigned this material, right, and let's call it gray. Okay, and this one, we'll call it gravy. Why not? Okay, makes no sense, but it's fun. So we're looking at the proxy, and I just assigned the material to the proxy, right? Nothing is visible, right? So what's happening? Well, what's happening is that the material mode is from proxy. So the core extracts the material from inside the proxy, which is these two, right? And uses them. Okay, if I tell the proxy, hey, use the material from the scene I just assigned, right? And let's make this gray a little bit bluish. Why not? Okay, you can see this totally works, right? But sometimes you might have 100 materials in your proxy, because it's sometimes the biggest advantage of a proxy is that it alleviates your viewport, it alleviates your scene. You don't have to carry so much data. The proxy, in essence, is read from your hard drive, sent to the GPU, and rendered, and that's it. But on top of that, you can override a few things, right? Trace sets, visibility, tessellation. Right now, because we're really far into these things, we're going to talk about how to override the materials in here. You see here, it's called RS Material 2 and RS Material 1. Now, if you're thinking about, hey, I'm going to go here, and by the way, this is nice, you can copy this, right? Because this is called blah, 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 something. You'll have a hard time remembering. So if you're thinking this is material, let's see if I can paste it. Can I? Okay, the copy didn't work. Now let's try again, because we're brave. Nope, it didn't work. Sorry about that. I have to type it. Or I have to go through scripting. Let's see if we can go through scripting a bit, because I don't want to type it. Oh, come on. When you're in a hurry, always click. You know what? Let's see if I can do it. With shortcuts, I can't. Okay, click on plus. Whatever. Let's come back here and nope. I'm sorry, I cannot paste this. So the way it works is like this. If you're thinking you cannot call this RS material 1, okay, because that's an SG. You don't know what the SG does, and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to do that, and use from scene with prefix. And that means this is not going to work. You need to call it in here, RS material 1 SG, okay? And this will work. As you can see, the material from here has been replaced, okay? And this is extremely, extremely powerful. The thing is, let's say you have RS material 1, 2, 3, 100, and so on and so forth. And this can be a bit of a pain because, well, how do you make the difference between this proxy and another proxy that has a different material, different objects, but the same material names, right? You can have 2 of these proxies. And the way it works, it's via prefixes. Okay, let's call this my and underscore, right? I have put there a prefix. The moment I put there a prefix, this got the link between this material getting replaced with this shading group got broken, right? So what I can do though, it's put this my underscore as a prefix. And now this works. Okay, so that means you can have one something or some prefix for some materials, some prefix for some other materials, and you can organize your scene. And this is really, really, really important. And because, as I said, this is indeed a Redshift proxy, right? It's a kind of a black box, but you can override things. And if you can, for instance, you have that's not necessarily a heavy simulation or anything, from Houdini or from someplace else, it will be hard to make this work and getting organized because you have to name things properly. And the guy that gave you the proxy has to name his things properly. So if you're in a position of working with someone else via proxying, please tell him to take some time, name things properly, because in the end, if things happen and you have to change something, the more organized you are, the better it is. Okay, so this is how you actually modify or change things inside the proxy. Now, the beauty of this is this material, which is incidentally made in Maya, right, could have been made in Houdini or C4D or something. And by the way, in C4D, materials are named like this. Material name. Okay. Now, of course, you cannot call this proxy slash blah. It doesn't work. Maya is very specific. You see here that it changes, it switches the slash to an underscore. You have to do the same thing. And if you get something from Houdini, you're gonna have to name this underscore material name. This is how it will work. Well, assuming I can type this one, it looks like I can't. Okay, so you have to pay attention to naming convention. You have to pay attention to shading groups. Okay, and if you really, really need to do things with your proxy, the most important thing that you want to remember is this. If I instance this object, it will work as an instance. If I don't, and I create another proxy with the exact same name, I'm really keen on explaining this, right? So you see here is simpleball.rs. Let's create another proxy. And you're thinking, hey, I'm gonna do this, and because it's the same string, right? That was called simpleball. Because it's the same string, Maya Redshift has to use the exact same proxy, and this will save me some memory. No, this won't work. At this point, you've created a copy, not an instance. If you need to create an instance, go the instance way. That means edit, duplicate special, and here I'm going to reset, and this is important. Okay, if you duplicate input connection or duplicate input graph, you can end up with different things. And to show you this, the most important thing that you can look at is the hypergraph. So let me open hypergraph, because hypergraph should show you leaf levels. So if you're going display hidden, come on, hidden nodes. Okay, and I like to see shapes. This is very important. Option display shapes. What do you see here? Well, at this point, you see the following. There's a node, there's another node. These are for transform, and these are shapes. Shape 1 and shape 2. Do they have the same thing or not? Well, unfortunately, they're different. What you need is actually the same shape sharing 2 different transform nodes. Okay, so let's try to do this again. Edit, duplicate special. Man, we're running out of time. And move this away. Did I select 2 of them or only 1? There you go. Okay, and let's see this time. Okay, and for some reason this still shows 2 of them. But it's important to understand that if you want to instance proxy, do proper instancing. Okay, don't try to do just copies based on the fact that it's the same string for the proxy shape, proxy file name. That's what it's called, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, file name. Okay, so this is important. For instance, and these are really, really interesting. You can export a VDB volume, right? Let's say you create a cloud in Houdini and you export it as a proxy, okay? And as a proxy, because it's a mesh, it can be instanced. It cannot be instanced as a volume VDB, right? It's a bit complicated. For instance, if I create here Redshift create volume, right, with shape, and I try to instance this, it might work. I haven't done it in a while. Okay, let's do this. Redshift might not be able to render this as an instance, right? So you have to export it as a proxy, and then because you can actually override materials in the proxy, then you can work with the volume without having to care about how this volume initial material was created or something like that. Now, unfortunately, it's almost an hour. I'm talking continuously, and I think we're kind of at the end of the road. And I have a lot more to say to you, but I don't think you have the time. So, Ellie, how are we going?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we can run over a little bit. That's not a problem. If you have something else that you'd really like to show.
Yes.
Are there any other questions?
So we did actually get asked by Jay earlier, how do you actually deploy it being Redshift into Maya? Is there a button to press?
Deploy? What do you mean? What to deploy?
It's like, how do you actually get Redshift inside of Maya?
Of Maya?
I believe. I think, yeah.
Okay. Now, this can be a bit tricky. And this on macOS, Linux, and Windows, things are a bit different. On macOS, we're not using the Maya env, we're using the module, the Maya module. Okay, so let's see if I can do this, if it's not a bit weird, because Maya tends sometimes to be weird. Okay, so you have a Maya module path here. Okay, And you can see that one of these things that are here might be linked to a Redshift string. And if not, you'll have to do it. Let's see if I can show it to you. The easiest way out. I don't know if you're interested in a macOS or not. In Maya, it's simple. It's in Linux, the same thing. You can edit the Maya env. When Redshift installs, it can modify the Maya env for you, okay, or not. It doesn't copy any files into any place besides the C program data Redshift. On macOS, it's a bit different. Okay, so if you're interested to know this in macOS, I think it's a bit different. I haven't done this in quite a while. Okay, so you have to open Maya, show package, content, contents, modules. Okay, you see here, there's a Redshift for Maya.mod. Now, when we ship Redshift, and this is something that I like to stress out, is that please do read the documentation because it's important. Okay, and I've seen this happening when people did not know that what we ship as it's just a template. Yes, it's called template. Okay, Redshift for Maya, and you think, hey, I'm gonna copy this here. Okay, and it's a template. It's like, call it an example, right? It has to end up with the name .mod, not .mod.template. Okay, you might think, hey, I put this here, it's enough. No, it's not. Okay, so here's how the Maya env can look like, and I need some sort of text editor. Okay, so this is what can be used if you want to go Maya env way. And if you want to go Maya mod, you have to copy this in here or in a place where Maya can actually read for the modules. You can see here Maya module path, application, Maya app contents modules, right? This is why this is copied in here. I copied there. This is not happening automatically, okay? Because if you're installing Redshift on a Mac OS and you're expecting to see Maya pop up and get Redshift, it doesn't work. But once you did this, right, and you go to Windows, Setting and Preferences, Plugin Manager, you have it somewhere here, somewhere here. There you go, Redshift for Maya.bundle. Okay, and you enable it, you load the plugin, and it's available inside Maya. Okay, and you can have, of course, you can have your own shelf. This is the traditional Redshift shelf, except these three. And as I said, programming wise, yeah, you can do a lot of really interesting things. For instance, this is a mail script I wrote to vary object IDs based on selection, right? You can do a lot of crazy things. Hey, you can do a lot of crazy things in C4D as well. It's just a bit easier for me in Maya. If you want to go C4D way through Python, by all means, go. In the end, it's just Python using some API, nothing else. Okay, but as I said, if you're going the Maya env way, that's a way. For macOS, you have to go through the module way, and for that, you see that I had to copy the file into the Maya app itself, right? You can see here Maya.app. Well, Maya.app or apps in macOS are a bit more complicated than a simple executable file. They contain a lot of things, resources, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is how you set it up. Once you drag this from here and you just name it properly, basically removing the template, it should work, no problem whatsoever. Okay, and it's fast and it's stable, no problems, absolutely. And you see that I'm on a really tiny Mac Mini, and it still works amazingly. Okay, so it might be a bit slow, but you know what? It works. It doesn't crash or anything. So I can't tell you how happy I am with these kind of things. What else can I tell you about proxies that you have to pay attention? Yes, one thing that I find is really, really nice. Let's say for a second, this will be a bit of a wow moment if you want. Let's say for a second you want to do this, create, and you have about 100 or 50 proxies that you want to bring in. What you're gonna do, okay, this is the first proxy, and I have something called Redshift placeholder 1. I have no freaking clue where this is coming from. I'm gonna go for the second one. Okay, this will be what? This will be the second one. Now imagine you have 500 of these. You have no clue how this works, which one is which. They might have no connection between them, right? But if you script that, let's see. First, let's find it because it's desktop scripts, and let me find the one that says import from folder. It's just easier to read. Import Redshift proxies. Okay, oh, it was here. Okay, so we get this. We run that, and I can go to proxies and Redshift proxy. Okay, this is one, and it's scripted that it only gets you one. Okay, but you can select more than one. And you see that it kept the name. So how about running this thing for everything? All 50 of them. There you go. You know the name. Okay, there's some place around here, right? And it's not something very, very complicated. It's like 30 lines of code, nothing else, right? And yes, it's everything inside. And this is easy to figure out. Oh, this is frame 550 of my animation. Okay, I know what it is, right? Instead of having something called Redshift placeholder 1 or 50, and so on and so forth. Guys, I think we're still running out of time. Or I can talk for two more days if you want.
I think we can probably go maybe to, let's do like another sort of like 7 minutes, and so then we sort of run over too far. But if that's cool with you.
Yeah, more questions.
So Benoit was wondering, do you have any naming convention recommendations for RS proxy sequences? For whatever reason, his sequences are always messed up with the numbers.
Oh, now this is one difference between proxy sequences in Maya and C4D. Actually, in C4D in general, Maya is not a big fan of underscores. We use a lot of dots. For instance, if I can click on this button, and hey, I can. Okay, so it's like this. The naming in general in Maya is name dot something, usually 4 of these dot something else extension, right? So in the case of proxy, let's call it my proxy dot 0001.rs, and from 001 to 9999, right? This is how it works. In C4D, things will be probably like this or like this. In C4D, you can't export like this, okay? Now, Maya will work with this, no problem whatsoever. But just remember that. Now, the thing is, when you have this, okay, as a proxy sequence, and I can go here and Redshift proxy, create, and pick up that particle sequence, right? And let me hide this for a second. You can go here, and for the proxy, you have use file sequence. Now, let's preview the mesh here. Okay. Here's the thing. This goes via expression. Okay, and the expression here says frame. Frame equals frame extensions equals frame. But what if you want to offset this? The way it will work, you're gonna go frame again at expression level, right? C4D is way easier than Maya. This you're just getting an offset, an animation, and looping, and everything. It's so much easier. Let's say I have 15 frames to offset this. Bam. Okay. Now there's a problem though. This will end up with numbers that don't exist in the file name. And strangely enough, this is empty right now. I don't know why. It shouldn't be empty. Okay. This should be something here. Now, if you want to speed up, you can see that this is disappearing, right? Look at this. This is kind of an empty thing. You don't see it because it's gone. I have 50 frames, right? But they're offsetted by 15. Okay, so you're not gonna end up at 50. You're gonna end up at 35. You can see 35 and 36 is nothing. Okay, if you want to loop this, oh God, it's again expressions. Okay, so let's say I want to loop every 10 frames. Okay, let's say it's like this. I don't know if I can't remember if this works or not. So this is the modulo 10. Okay, and that means 10 frames, 10 frames, 10 frames, 10 frames. Okay, I can loop this, but it's, to be honest, it's not as funny as going in here and say, hey, give me a proxy. And go to the animation and I set whatever I want. Really, this is really artistic friendly. This is kind of TD friendly because you have to understand expressions, right? So, oh yeah, you can offset it by here, but, or let's say you don't want to offset it as simple as with a frame offset. You can see here, I'm cycling this, right? Or looping, whatever you want to call. Maybe you want to say, hey, increase the speed. But again, increasing the speed means skipping proxies. It doesn't mean I'm gonna get a better motion blur or I'm gonna get data where there isn't. It doesn't morph between one proxy and the other proxy. That's impossible. So think about whatever you want to do with this before doing it. Okay, so this is how it works. Okay, at this point I'm at frame 81. There's nothing, and to be honest, you can see the values from the frame number here, right? So 50 divided by 2, it's 25. 25 is the last frame I can have as a geometry. After that, there's nothing because I didn't sped up. I just skipped proxies. Other questions? I don't know how long we have.
I think,
but I can keep talking.
I think those were actually a lot of the questions. A few of the guys have been answering some in the background.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so to make a long story short, okay, when you're exporting proxies, be mindful of what you're exporting them from, for. So if you want motion blur with the proxies, export with motion blur enabled. If you need to tessellate or displace the proxy afterwards, be sure to enable check the Polygon Connectivity. If you want to override materials, please make sure that you know the material names. Don't let them nilly-willy be the same thing all over. Of course, when you're working with Maya, everything is easy because materials names are unique. There's not a big problem to rename materials, or not necessarily rename materials, but have them using a prefix, right? So if I go to the Blender, for instance, this is quite an issue with this guy, right? If I can, of course, I can render it, no problem whatsoever. Let's see, processing textures. Oh, by the way, yeah, this is very, very important. I don't think we have time, but let's make at least more for my 5 more minutes, okay? A proxy doesn't contain textures. Forget about everything you think that this is a scene and it should contain textures. No. And to be honest, besides Blender that is capable of embedding a texture into a scene, I haven't seen anything that can save a scene and contains the texture. There's no such thing. Even C4D has to go export scene with assets or save scene with assets, right? Assets are different. So what you're getting inside are strings. That's all it has. It has lights, it has materials, it has particles, it has volumes, it has meshes, and strings for materials, right? And what does it mean when you're exporting this? And if your texture, for instance, let's try for a second to get a file texture in here. I'm sorry, guys, this is important. I don't think we have time, but we're gonna try. Okay, let's get this like arrow, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I don't care about the proxy. I'm just gonna go for simple play, nothing else. Okay, and assign this one. Let's connect this to the diffuse. Come on. Come on, Mini-Me. Work with me, please. Okay, so this is what I'm seeing, right? Now, check this out. The string in here, it's in absolute mode. And that means if I export this as a proxy, and let's do that. Redshift Proxy Export. Okay, export whatever, doesn't care about anything else. I don't want to motion blur or anything. Plain .rs. Okay, and what I'm gonna do here, it's go to the textures and move the arrow PNG, move it, I don't know, on my desktop. Okay, now I'm gonna come back, assuming I'm on a different machine. And I've got this proxy. And here's my thing. Can I render it? No, actually, yes, but I'm not gonna get any materials. It's black. There's an alpha there, of course, so clearly the rays that are shot from the camera are reaching the mesh. Everything is fine, but it doesn't work, and you're kind of banging your head to something, trying to figure out why the heck this is not something that it's rendering. It's black. I'm looking at my materials. Says, okay, I have a material. Okay, the plane exists in the scene. It's still black, and it's black because this guy here doesn't exist. Okay, and it's not a material that's visible for you. By chance, I have this because I can remove it. And you're looking at this, and you see nothing in there. Okay, now there is a way to do that. Okay, and it's through the Redshift command line. Or if you want to script it, yes, you can script it. Now, Redshift command line, command found because it's not so easy to find. Redshift being Redshift command line. Come on. It's not like this, sorry, it's applications. Redshift bin Redshift command line. Okay, now if you're running this, you're gonna get a bunch of help, let's say, from this, hopefully at some point. Oh, by the way, let's stop this first. Okay, there you go. And one of the little important things that you can get in here, it's print dependencies. Okay, so let's do this. Let's get the proxy from wherever it is. And this is something really, really important in your workflow when you're getting things from someone else's proxy. Okay, desktop proxies. Where's my plane? Where's my plane? There's my plane. Okay, minus print dependencies. If I can type. So let's see what we get. That's one important option, and the other one is file info. Oh, come on. Oh, okay, it has to be before the proxy, sorry. Minus print dependencies. Okay, this should spit out whatever textures I have in there and their path. There you go. And now I magically realize there's a dependency that I need, and it's in here. So what are my options? Either I reconstruct the folder structure, or I use this little thing called ORO. Okay, and this is a text file that says the following. Sorry, not this one. It's an envar. This is for overriding render variables. Just a second. I have to figure it out. I can ask Ellie to tell you the next time. There's a way to actually override texture strings. For instance, you can override this, right, with this. And that means when the engine looks at the string and it finds this piece and whatever, it can replace this bit with this bit. And that means you can have proxy from other people with completely different texture path that you can override. Now, this is in our documentation, guys. So if you're looking at help Maxon, wherever that is, because I don't know things by heart, there you go. And it should be R something, R3D. And you go in here, and it doesn't matter if it's Maya or anything else, right? You're going to the installation and Redshift environment variables, and you can find Redshift path override file, okay? And in this file, let's say you can override texture strings, okay, from one location to another location, simply because the user that exported the proxy simply forgot. It's human error. It's normal. We're not robots, we forget. This is how it works, okay? So you can use a path override file environment variable that you define before starting Maya, and this is a text file someplace on your hard drive. You point to that text on your hard drive, and it's as simply as something like this. C temp, and I'm gonna change this to, I don't know, users me, okay? And you have to put this between quotes. So you're replacing this string with this string, and you save this file. And because you've defined an environment variable called Redshift path override pointing to this exact file, then your proxy will be able to find dependencies, okay? And those dependencies don't necessarily have to be textures. They can be other proxies that they have their own dependencies, okay? This can be nested, and it can get complicated because I can take this and export it as a proxy again. And if I export this as a proxy and I look at the proxy dependency with print dependencies in the Redshift command line, I'm not gonna see the actual texture inside. What I'm gonna see, it's another proxy. So you have to crawl down into the proxy nesting to figure out what is missing. But there's an easier way. If you're trying to render and it doesn't work, the log will tell you. Okay, so if I open the log here, you're gonna notice that, well, you don't see anything right now, maybe in the warnings, right? If you're opening the log, you're gonna see a bit of a red lines at some point. Please open the log. Okay, let's open the log folder. Well, a Mac is as fast as it can, but this one isn't. So you're gonna get something like this. Okay, texture file, blah, 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 was not found. Okay, so you have a hint in here. The first thing, instead of going to the Redshift command line and trying to print dependencies, you're gonna start hunting any errors in the log. That's why the logs are really, really important. I think we're way over line with the time. So I think we're gonna stop here, guys. Is that okay with you?
That is perfect. Thank you so much for going through all of this amazing stuff. And we like everyone loves when we overrun anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it. Hannah's already said, thanks so much for your commitment. Very enlightening and broadening horizons. Enjoyed it very much. And thanks so much to the rest of us. Thanks, Hannah. That's such a lovely comment. And I agree.
Yeah, this was great today. There's a lot of great information in here.
Yeah, it was
I'm glad I could help.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you, Adrian, Lionel, Ian, and I know Saul's not on here, but I'm gonna shout him out anyway and say thanks to him as well for diving into Redshift across all the different DCCs. So for anyone who if this is the first time you've been watching, we've gone into Redshift and Maya, Houdini, Blender, and ZBrush over the last 4 weeks. And so if you ever want to catch up on any of those, head over to the Training Team YouTube channel. So yeah, thank you so much, especially to the 4 of you for diving into these Redshift across these other software packages. I know I've really enjoyed kind of learning and being part of it, as has a lot of people based on the comments that we've had. So thank you.
Thanks, guys, for having the patience to listen to all this.
No, your explanations are incredible, as a few people are saying in the comments, and I definitely agree for sure. Cool. So before we wrap up, don't forget, next Monday we're starting a brand new demystifying series where it's going to be diving into Unreal workflows with ZBrush and Substance with Anna Carolina. And remember, that is going to be on YouTube, on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, live on there, as opposed to GoToWebinar. So don't forget to hit that little notification bell on there, and then you'll get a reminder similar to how you get one for these sessions. So thanks again, everyone. Thank you for those of you who are here. You know we love to overrun, and for your wonderful questions. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your Mondays and a great week. And I will see you on another session soon.
Sounds great. Bye, everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye, guys.